Commander Sarah Chen walked through the empty halls of the Human Military Academy on Kepler 442b. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Just 3 days ago, these corridors buzzed with activity. Human instructors taught alien officers the art of war. Students from 12 different species learned together. Now the academy was a ghost town. She stopped at her office door and read the message painted in red letters across it. Human scum, go home. Sarah shook her head. 5 years ago, these same aliens had begged humans to teach them. They called humans the greatest military minds in the galaxy. Now they wanted all humans gone. The evacuation order sat on her desk. All humans had 72 hours to leave Confederation space. The official reason was that humans were too violent for galactic peace. Sarah knew better. She had seen the secret communications. The real reason was fear. 50 years ago, humanity made first contact with the Galactic Confederation. It seemed like a dream come true. 12 advanced alien species welcomed Earth into their alliance. They shared technology, trade routes, and knowledge. But they wanted something from humans, too. The aliens had been fighting wars for thousands of years, but they were terrible at it. Their battles lasted decades. Millions died in poorly planned attacks. When they saw human military history, they were amazed. Humans had perfected warfare in just a few thousand years. What took aliens centuries to learn, humans figured out in decades. The Confederation begged humans to teach them. They built academies on every major world. Human officers became the most respected military teachers in the galaxy. Sarah herself had trained over 300 alien commanders. She had written textbooks that were used on 100 worlds. But success bred jealousy. As human-trained forces won battle after battle, some aliens grew worried. Humans were becoming too influential, too important. What if humans decided to take over? The fear spread like poison through the Confederation. Sarah picked up a data pad and scrolled through the news feeds. The story was the same everywhere. Human colonies were being evacuated. Human businesses were being shut down. Human citizens were being arrested on made-up charges. The galaxy had turned against humanity, overnight. Her communicator beeped. It was Admiral Torres from Earth Command. His face appeared on the screen, looking tired and angry. "Sarah, what's the situation there?" he asked. "The same as everywhere else, sir. They want us gone. The Zephyrians who used to salute me now spit when I walk by. My best student, Commander Velkith, won't even look at me." Torres nodded grimly. "I just got word from the outer colonies. It's worse than we thought. They're not just kicking us out. They're planning something bigger." Sarah felt cold. "What do you mean?" Intel intercepted a communication from the Confederation High Council. "They're not satisfied with just removing us from their space. They want to make sure we can never threaten them again." "And how do they plan to do that?" Torres was quiet for a moment. "Complete extinction, Sarah. They're going to wipe out humanity entirely. They're calling it Operation Final Peace." Sarah sat down hard. The aliens weren't just betraying their teachers. They were planning genocide. "How long do we have?" "Intelligence says 6 months, maybe less. They're building the largest fleet in galactic history. Every species is contributing ships. Even the peaceful ones have joined the alliance against us." Sarah looked out her office window at the alien city below. She had lived here for 5 years. She had friends here, or thought she did. The crystalline merchants who sold her coffee every morning. The Voidwalker mechanics who serviced her shuttle. The young hegemony officers who called her Teacher Chen with respect. Now they all wanted her dead. "There's more," Torres continued. "They're using everything we taught them. Our battle formations, our tactics, our strategies. They've had 50 years to study our methods. Some of their commanders know our doctrines better than we do." Sarah felt sick. Every lesson she had taught, every innovation she had shared, would now be used to destroy her species. The irony was cruel. Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy would become the weapon used to end them. "What are your orders, sir?" "Get our people out. All of them. We're pulling back to Earth and the Sol system. It's going to be the last stand of humanity." Sarah started to protest. "Sir, we have civilians on dozens of worlds. Families, children." "I know. We're doing everything we can. But Sarah, You need to understand something. This isn't just about evacuation anymore. This is about survival. They've united the entire galaxy against us. 12 species, thousands of worlds, millions of ships. We're looking at odds that would make a mathematician cry. The weight of it hit her. Humanity faced extinction. Not from a natural disaster or an accident, but from the very species they had helped. The students were going to kill their teachers. Is there any hope, sir? She asked quietly. Torres was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, harder. Sarah, do you remember what I taught you about desperate enemies? She nodded. It was one of his favorite lessons. Never corner a desperate enemy unless you're prepared for them to do the unthinkable. Exactly. The aliens think they know us because we taught them our tactics. But Sarah, we never taught them everything. We never taught them what humans do when we have nothing left to lose. Sarah felt a spark of something. Not hope exactly, but not despair either. What do you mean? Think about it. We taught them warfare, but we never taught them about human nature. They learned our formations and our strategies, but they never learned why we fight. They never learned what makes humans dangerous. Sarah started to understand. The aliens had learned human tactics from textbooks and simulations, but they had never seen humans fighting for their lives. They had never seen what humans could do when faced with extinction. I need you to do something for me, Sarah, Torres said. I need you to make a list of every officer you trained, every student you taught, every alien commander who learned from humans. I want to know their strengths, their weaknesses, their personalities. Everything. Sir, that's hundreds of officers across dozens of species. I know. But Sarah, they're about to learn something that wasn't in any textbook we ever wrote. They're about to learn what happens when you threaten humanity's survival. Sarah nodded. She understood now. The aliens thought they had learned everything they needed from humans. But they had made one critical error. They had learned how to fight like humans, but they had never learned how to think like humans. As she started packing her belongings, Sarah thought about her students. Bright, eager aliens who had hung on her every word. They had respected her, maybe even liked her. But when their leaders told them to hate humans, they had obeyed without question. That was their weakness, Sarah realized. They followed orders without thinking. They trusted authority without question. They had learned human tactics, but they still thought like aliens. Humans were different. When pushed to the edge, when faced with extinction, humans didn't follow rules. They broke them. They did the impossible. They found ways to win when winning was impossible. The aliens were about to get a very expensive education in human nature, and Sarah Chen was going to make sure they never forgot the lesson. Earth had never seen so many ships in its orbit. Transport vessels from across human space arrived daily, packed with refugees from the colonies. The Luna orbital stations overflowed with families who had lost everything. Children pressed their faces against viewports, watching their new home grow larger. They didn't understand why they had to leave their friends behind. Admiral Marcus Torres stood in the Strategic Command Center, watching the refugee reports scroll past. 2 million humans evacuated so far, another 3 million still scattered, across Confederation space, racing to reach extraction points before time ran out. Sir, we have a problem, Lieutenant Morrison announced from his station. The Centauri convoy is 12 hours behind schedule. They're reporting engine trouble. Torres felt his jaw tighten. 12 hours could mean the difference between escape and capture. The Confederation had promised safe passage during the evacuation, but their promises meant nothing now. Get me Admiral Chen. Tell her to take a squadron and escort them home. Doctor. Elena Vasquez entered the command center carrying a thick data pad. She looked exhausted. For the past week, she had been working around the clock, cataloging everything humanity had taught the galaxy. It was a depressing job. Admiral, you need to see this, she said, placing the pad on his desk. Torres looked at the screen. It showed a battle formation he recognized immediately. Clean, efficient, devastating. This is the Phoenix formation. I developed it myself 15 years ago. The hegemony has been drilling with it for the past month. They've modified it for their ship types, but it's unmistakably human doctrine. Torres scrolled through more images. Zephyrian fleets using human siege tactics. Crystalline forces employing human infiltration techniques. Voidwalker squadrons practicing human hit-and-run strategies. They're not just using our old tactics, Elena continued. They've improved them, combined human innovation with alien, technology, and biology. The result is... She paused, looking for the right word. Terrifying, Torres finished. Elena nodded. We created something we never intended. We made them better warriors than we are. Torres leaned back in his chair. It was true. 50 years of teaching had turned the galaxy's military forces into a nearly perfect war machine. Human creativity plus alien resources equaled a force that could crush Earth's defenses like paper. How many ships are they massing? He asked. Conservative. Estimates put it at over 1 million vessels. That's just the ones we can detect. The real number might be twice that. Torres felt old. He had spent his career teaching aliens how to fight. Now those same aliens were preparing to use his lessons to exterminate his species. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so horrible. Sir, Lieutenant Morrison called out, we're getting reports from deep space monitoring stations. Confederation fleets are moving toward our borders. How long until they reach the Sol system? At current speed, 4 months. Maybe less if they push their engines. 4 months to prepare for the largest invasion in human history. Torres looked around the command center at his officers. Good people, all of them. They deserved better than this. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Maybe it's not as hopeless as we think. Torres turned to see Commander Sarah Chen entering. She had arrived on the last transport from Kepler 442b. She carried herself differently now. Harder. The betrayal had changed her. What do you mean, Sarah? Torres asked. Sarah moved to the tactical display and called up a star chart. I've been thinking about our situation. Yes, they outnumber us. Yes, they're using our tactics. But there's something they don't have. Which is? Desperation. Sarah highlighted the Sol system on the display. Admiral, what did you always tell us about cornered enemies? Torres began to understand. They become dangerous in ways you can't predict. Exactly. The aliens learned our textbook tactics. But textbooks are written during peacetime, by people who have options. They never learned what humans do when we have no choice but to fight. Elena looked up from her data pad. But Sarah, they have overwhelming numbers. Even desperate tactics have limits. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Do they? Elena, you've studied our military history. What's the most consistent pattern in human warfare? Elena thought for a moment. We adapt. We innovate. We find new ways to fight when the old ways fail. Right. And when do we innovate fastest? When we're losing, Elena said slowly. Torres felt something stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, but something close to it. Sarah, what are you thinking? The TE aliens made one critical mistake. They assumed our military thinking was finished. That the tactics we taught them 50 years ago were the best we could do. But Admiral, has human military thinking ever stopped evolving? Torres shook his head. Never. Every war teaches us something new. Sarah pulled up another display. Then let's give them a war they've never seen before. Let's show them what 50 years of human innovation looks like when we're fighting for our lives. Lieutenant Morrison looked up from his station. Commander, what exactly are you proposing? Sarah's smile grew wider. We're going to teach the galaxy one final lesson. We're going to show them the difference between learning human tactics and understanding human psychology. Torres felt his strategic mind beginning to work. The tactics they learned are 50 years old. They're based on humans having something to lose, colonies to protect, civilians to evacuate, infrastructure to preserve. But now we don't have any of that, Sarah continued. We have nothing left but Earth and the will to survive. That changes everything. Elena was starting to look interested. You mean we can use strategies that were too dangerous before? Too destructive? Exactly. The aliens learned how to fight like responsible humans, but they never learned how to fight like desperate ones. Torres moved to the tactical display. His fingers danced over the controls, bringing up defensive positions around Earth. What do you have in mind? Sarah joined him at the display. Remember the old saying about asymmetric warfare? The defender doesn't have to win. They just have to make victory too expensive for the attacker. But Sarah, Elena protested, they have the resources of an entire galaxy. Cost means nothing. To them. Material cost, yes. But what about psychological cost? What about the cost to their alliance? 12 species united by fear and hatred. What happens to that unity when the war doesn't go as planned? Torres began to see it. The Confederation expected a quick, clean victory. They expected to use human tactics to defeat humans efficiently. But what if the war became something else entirely? What if it became the kind of brutal, grinding conflict that broke alliances and shattered morale? You want to turn our disadvantages into advantages, he said. Sarah nodded. We're outnumbered, so we fight in ways that make numbers less important. We're outgunned, so we fight in places where big guns can't reach. We're alone, so we make them fight each other. Lieutenant Morrison spoke up again. But how do we do that? They have every advantage. Sarah turned to face the room. Because they learned from us, but they never learned to think like us. They know our formations, our strategies, our standard operating procedures. But they don't know how we think when everything we've learned stops working. Torres felt his confidence growing. The tactics they learned assume we're trying to preserve something. Territory, resources, civilian populations. But if we're facing extinction anyway, then we have nothing left to lose, Sarah finished. And humans with nothing to lose are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Elena was furiously taking notes. We need to catalog everything that's changed since we last updated our doctrine. New technologies, new theories, experimental weapons. More than that, Torres said. We need to think about what humans can do that aliens can't. What makes us different? Sarah counted on her fingers. We're more adaptable. We're better at improvisation. We're willing to take risks that other species consider insane. And we're creative, Elena added. Human creativity in warfare is legendary. We turn anything into a weapon. Torres looked around the command center with new eyes. These weren't the faces of a defeated people. These were the faces of humans who had been pushed too far. The galaxy was about to learn why that was a mistake. All right, he said. We have 4 months to prepare for the largest invasion in galactic history. Let's give them a war they'll never forget. As the command staff began planning humanity's last stand, none of them noticed the small smile on Sarah Chen's face. The aliens thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were wrong. They had learned human tactics, but they had never seen human fury. That was about to change. Fleet Commander Zektar of the Hegemony adjusted his ceremonial armor as his flagship approached the Sol system. Today would be remembered as the day the galaxy ended the human threat forever. Behind him, 10,000 ships moved in perfect formation. The Confederation's first wave was a thing of beauty. Zektar smiled as he watched the tactical display. Every ship in position, every formation textbook perfect. Admiral Torres himself had taught him these maneuvers 15 years ago. The old human had been a good teacher. It was almost sad that he would have to die. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're detecting the human defense fleet. 400 ships arranged in standard defensive positions around Earth. Zektar nodded. Even the human's final formation was one he recognized. The Luna Fortress defense, developed by human strategists 30 years ago. He had studied it extensively. He knew exactly how to break it. Begin the attack, he ordered. Formation, Delta 7. Let's show them what we learned. The Confederation fleet moved forward like a tide of metal and energy. Zektar watched with professional interest as the humans scrambled to respond. Their movements were predictable, following doctrine he had memorized. This would be over quickly. Then, something unexpected happened. The human ships suddenly scattered in all directions, abandoning their formation entirely. Half of them seemed to simply vanish from sensors. The other half charged directly at the Confederation fleet with no regard for tactics or survival. What are they doing? Zektar demanded. His tactical officer looked confused. Sir, they're not following any known human doctrine. This isn't in any of their textbooks. Zektar felt the first stirring of unease. He had studied every human battle formation, every recorded tactic. This chaotic charge made no sense. Where was their famous discipline? Their careful planning? The answer came in the form of explosions throughout his fleet. The human ships that had vanished weren't gone. They were using some kind of stealth technology that made them invisible to Confederation sensors. Now they reappeared inside Zektar's formation, firing weapons that shouldn't exist. One of his cruisers simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not exploded. It was there one moment and gone the next, leaving only empty space and confused sensor readings. "Report!" Zektar shouted. "Unknown weapon type, sir. Some kind of matter dissolution beam. We have no defense against it." Another surprise. The human ships that had charged his lines weren't trying to ram. They were releasing swarms of small fighters that moved unlike anything in the galactic database. These fighters twisted through space in impossible patterns, dodging enemy fire with movements that should have killed their pilots. How are they surviving those accelerations? His navigator asked. Zektar didn't know. Human biology couldn't handle the forces those fighters were generating, unless the fighters weren't manned at all. But that was impossible. The humans had never shown any advanced artificial intelligence. A new alarm sounded. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy readings from the third planet's moon." Zektar looked at the tactical display in shock. Luna, Earth's moon, was changing. Sections of its surface were folding back like flower petals, revealing weapon emplacements, the size of cities. The moon wasn't just fortified. It had been turned into the largest weapons platform in the galaxy. "When did they build that?" he whispered. The first shot from Luna's main gun vaporized 3 of his battleships instantly. The second shot punched through his flagship's shields like they were made of paper. Zektar grabbed his command chair as the bridge shook under the impact. "Evasive maneuvers! All ships, scatter formation!" But scattering was exactly what the humans wanted. The moment his fleet broke formation, the real attack began. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, from inside gas clouds, from impossible angles. They moved like nothing Zektar had ever seen, using the solar system itself as cover. One group of human destroyers actually dove into Jupiter's atmosphere, using the gas giant's gravity to slingshot around and attack from below. Another squadron hid in Saturn's rings, emerging to strike at his rear guard. The humans were fighting like the solar system was their personal weapon. "Sir?" his communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from Earth." "Admiral..." Torres appeared on the main screen. He looked older than Zektar remembered, but his eyes were hard as steel. "Hello, Zektar," Torres said. "I hope you're enjoying your first lesson in advanced human tactics." Zektar felt anger rise in his throat. "You taught us everything, Torres. We know all your strategies." Torres smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Did I? Tell me, Zektar, what did I teach you about fighting a desperate enemy? Never corner them unless you're prepared for the consequences." "Good student. Now let me ask you something. In all those years I taught you, did I ever show you what humans do when they have nothing left to lose?" Zektar's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Everything I taught you was based on civilized warfare. Rules of engagement, protection of civilians, preservation of infrastructure. But Zektar, your people didn't just declare war on us. You declared genocide. That changes everything." Another wave of human fighters screamed past the flagship's viewports. These moved even faster than the first group, in patterns that hurt. To watch. They seemed to phase in and out of reality itself. "You see," Torres continued, "the tactics I taught you were designed for when we had something to protect. Colonies, trade routes, civilian populations, but you took all of that away from us. You left us with nothing but Earth and the will to survive." A human cruiser rammed one of Zektar's battleships at impossible speed. Both ships exploded, but somehow the human crew had ejected in escape pods that immediately began attacking nearby. Confederation vessels with weapons that turned matter into energy. "That's insane!" Zektar shouted. "They're throwing their lives away." "Are they?" Torres asked. "Or are they buying time for something else?" Zektar looked at his tactical display in growing horror. The human fleet wasn't trying to win in any conventional sense. They were causing maximum damage while dying as slowly as possible. Every human ship that died took multiple Confederation vessels with it. It was warfare without honor, without rules, without mercy. "You're animals!" he screamed at the screen. Torres' expression never changed. "No, Zektar, we're humans. There's a difference, but you never bothered to learn what it was." Another alarm sounded. Zektar's fleet was down to 8,000 ships. The humans had lost half their force, but they were still fighting. How were they still fighting? Sir, his tactical officer reported with a shaking voice, the human vessels aren't just attacking, they're learning. Their combat algorithms are adapting to our countermeasures in real time. Zektar felt ice in his veins. The humans weren't just using unknown technology. They were using technology that improved itself during battle. Every exchange of fire taught their systems something new. Impossible. Artificial intelligence that advanced doesn't exist. Torres heard him through the open channel. Doesn't it, Zektar? In all the years you studied under me, did you ever wonder what humans were working on that we didn't share? Did you think we taught you everything? The truth hit Zektar like a physical blow. The humans had held back. All those years of teaching, of sharing knowledge and tactics, and they had kept their best secrets hidden. You lied to us, he whispered. No, Torres replied. We taught you what you needed to know to be better soldiers. We never taught you how to fight humans. That would have been stupid. Zektar's flagship shuddered under another impact. His fleet was being torn apart by impossible weapons and insane tactics. This wasn't warfare as the galaxy understood it. This was something primal and terrifying. Retreat, he ordered. All ships, full retreat. But even retreat was difficult. Human ships pursued his fleeing vessels like hunting dogs, snapping at their heels with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. By the time the Confederation remnants reached the edge of the system, Zektar had lost 3,000 ships. 3,000 ships destroyed by 400 humans who fought like demons. As his battered fleet limped back toward Confederation space, Zektar stared at the tactical display. The humans had won, but at a terrible cost. Half their fleet was gone, their defense was in ruins, but they were still there, still fighting, still human. Torres's final transmission followed them into hyperspace. Tell your masters that was just a probe, Zektar. If they want to see what desperate humans can really do, send their main fleet. We'll be waiting. Zektar closed the channel and slumped in his command chair. He had learned something today that wasn't in any textbook. He had learned why the galaxy had needed human teachers in the first place. Because when it came to warfare, humans were artists, and they were about to paint their masterpiece in the blood of anyone foolish enough to threaten their survival. Supreme Commander Veltar studied the tactical reports from the first wave attack. 3,000 ships lost, 40% casualties. Against 400 human vessels, it should have been impossible. But the evidence was right there in the data streams. Veltar had been Admiral Torres's best student. For 10 years, he had learned everything the human could teach. Battle formations, siege tactics, fleet coordination. He had graduated at the top of his class from the Terra Military Academy. He understood human warfare better than any alien in the galaxy. Or so he had thought. The reports made no sense. Human ships that moved in impossible patterns. Weapons that violated known physics. Tactics that ignored everything Torres had ever taught about proper military doctrine. Commander. His aide approached carefully. The full battle fleet is assembled. 1,200,000 vessels. Every species has contributed their finest ships. Veltar nodded without looking up from the reports. 1,000,000 ships. The largest military force in galactic history. It should be enough to crush any defense no matter how desperate. What's our intelligence on Earth's remaining defenses? Less than 200 ships survived the first engagement. Their orbital platforms are damaged. Long-range scans show no new construction. Veltar frowned. That was the part that worried him. In all his years studying under Torres, one lesson had been repeated constantly. Humans always had a backup plan. Always. Sir, the aide continued, Fleet Commander Zektar wishes to address the command staff before we begin the assault. Send him in. Zektar entered the briefing room like a broken man. His uniform was crisp, his metals polished, but his eyes held something Veltar had never seen in a hegemony officer before. Fear. Commander, Zektar's voice was steady, but Veltar knew him well enough to hear the tremor underneath. I need to warn you about what we're facing. The humans fought well, but they took heavy casualties. The numbers are clear. Zektar shook his head. The numbers don't tell the whole story. Veltar, they're not fighting like humans anymore. They're fighting like something else. Something desperate and terrible. Veltar had heard rumors about what happened during the first wave. Ships that disappeared and reappeared. Weapons that turned matter into energy. Tactics that made no sense. Explain. Zektar activated a holographic display. It showed the battle from his flagship's perspective. Veltar watched in growing unease as human ships moved in patterns that should have killed their crews, used weapons that shouldn't exist, and fought with a savagery that went against everything he had learned about human military doctrine. "They're not following any of the tactics Torres taught us," Zektar continued. "It's like they threw away everything we know about their warfare and started fresh." Veltar studied the tactical data. Zektar was right. These weren't the careful, methodical humans he had studied under. These were something else entirely. "Perhaps," Veltar said slowly, "that's exactly what they did." He moved to the main display and called up Earth's tactical position. The third planet sat in the center of a defensive grid that looked pathetically weak compared to the approaching Confederation fleet. "Think about it," Veltar continued. "Everything we learned from humans was based on them having something to protect. Colonies, trade routes, civilian populations, standard military doctrine when you have assets to preserve." Zektar began to understand. "But now they have nothing left to protect except Earth itself." "Exactly. Which means all those rules we learned, all those careful tactics, they don't apply anymore." Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. He had spent years learning to think like a human military commander. But now he realized he had only learned to think like a human commander who was playing by civilized rules. "Sir," his tactical officer interrupted. "We're receiving long-range scans of the Sol system. You need to see this." The display shifted to show the approach to Earth. What Veltar saw made his blood run cold. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been rearranged. Not mined or moved. Rearranged. Rocks that had orbited the sun for billions of years now formed geometric patterns around the system's edge. "How is that possible?" he whispered. "Unknown, sir. The energy requirements to move that much mass would require the power output of a star." Veltar stared at the display. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. Not just Earth, not just Luna, but every moon, every asteroid, every planet. The whole system was a weapon. When did they do this? Based on orbital mechanics. It would have taken at least 50 years. 50 years. The same 50 years humans had been teaching the galaxy how to fight. While they shared their knowledge freely, they had been secretly preparing for this moment. "They planned this," Veltar said in amazement. "From the very beginning, they knew this day would come." Zektar nodded grimly. "Torres tried to warn me. He said we never learned what humans do when they have nothing left to lose. I thought it was just talk." Veltar looked at his million-ship fleet on the display. It seemed smaller now, less invincible. The humans had had 50 years to prepare for this battle. 50 years to build weapons, develop tactics, and plan their defense. "No," he said firmly. "We still have overwhelming numbers. Whatever tricks they have, we can absorb their losses and keep fighting. Numbers will win in the end." But even as he said it, Veltar wondered if he believed it. The humans had already proven that normal rules didn't apply to them. What if numbers didn't matter either? The fleet entered the Sol system in perfect formation. Veltar arranged his ships according to the textbook Torres himself had written. Every vessel in its proper place, every formation optimized for maximum efficiency. The first surprise came when they passed Pluto's orbit. The dwarf planet exploded, not attacked, not destroyed by enemy fire. It simply exploded, sending fragments, the size of moons, screaming through space at incredible velocity. Veltar watched in horror as an entire squadron of battleships vanished under the impact of accelerated planetoids. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. But there was nowhere to evade. More explosions erupted throughout the outer system. Neptune's moons detonated in sequence. Saturn's rings collapsed inward, creating a gravitational whirlpool that dragged 300 ships to their destruction. "They turned the whole system into a minefield," his tactical officer reported in disbelief. Veltar began to understand the scope of what the humans had done. This wasn't just a defense. It was a trap 50 years in the making. The real attack began as his fleet reached Jupiter. The gas giant's atmosphere erupted in patterns that hurt to look at. Fusion reactions cascaded through the planet's core, turning it into a temporary star. The energy release was so intense it created an artificial solar flare that blinded sensors throughout the fleet. In that moment of blindness, the human ships attacked. They came from everywhere and nowhere, from inside Jupiter's radiation belt, from behind Saturn's moons, from the asteroid belt itself. They moved like nothing Veltar had ever seen, using the solar system's own gravity wells to slingshot between targets at impossible speeds. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. They keep appearing and disappearing. Our sensors can't get a reliable count." Veltar watched his tactical display in growing horror. His carefully arranged formations were being torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight fair. Human ships would appear, strike with impossible weapons, and vanish before his forces could respond. One group of human destroyers actually flew through the corona of the sun itself, using the star's magnetic field to accelerate beyond anything his ships could match. They emerged like bullets of fire, striking his rear guard before disappearing back into the stellar chaos. "This is insane," he muttered, but it was working. His million-ship fleet was being carved apart by tactics that made no sense. The humans weren't trying to win through superior numbers or firepower. They were using the solar system itself as a weapon. Then Admiral Torres's voice echoed across all communication channels. "Hello, Veltar. I hope you're enjoying your advanced course in human warfare." Veltar's image appeared on his command screen. The old admiral looked tired but determined. Behind him, Veltar could see the blue curve of Earth. "Torres," Veltar responded. "Your tricks won't save you. I still have 800,000 ships." "Do you?" Torres asked mildly. "Are you sure about that count?" Veltar checked his displays. The numbers were fluctuating wildly. Ships appeared and disappeared from sensors. Battle damage reports contradicted each other. It was impossible to know how many vessels he actually had left. "What have you done to our sensors?" "Nothing," Torres replied. "But we've been broadcasting false signals, holographic projections, and electromagnetic ghosts for the past 6 hours. Half the ships you think you're fighting don't exist. The other half aren't where you think they are." Veltar felt reality shift around him. The humans weren't just using impossible weapons. They were making his own fleet fight shadows while the real threats struck from unexpected angles. "You're cheating," he said. Torres laughed, and it was a sound without humor. "Cheating? Veltar, you came here to commit genocide. You brought 1,000,000 ships to exterminate my species, and you're complaining about cheating?" A new alarm sounded. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy readings from Earth itself." The news of the Sol system battles spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Confederation's 1,000,000-ship armada, the largest military force in galactic history, had been destroyed by humans using weapons that shouldn't exist and tactics that made no sense. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the human ship Defiance, watching the liberation of Kepler 442b, the same planet where she had been forced to evacuate just 6 months ago. Now she was back, leading a fleet of human vessels to reclaim what had been stolen. The irony wasn't lost on her. The aliens below had cheered when humans were forced to leave. Now they were begging for mercy as human ships filled their skies. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from the planetary government. They're requesting terms." Sarah looked down at the world where she had spent 5 years of her life, where she had trained alien officers who later turned against her, where former students had painted hateful messages on her office door. "Put them through," she said. Governor Kexel appeared on the main screen. Sarah remembered him, a pompous crystalline who had delivered the original evacuation order with obvious pleasure. Now he looked terrified. "Admiral Chen," he said, his voice shaking, "we wish to discuss surrender terms." "Do you?" Sarah kept her voice neutral. "6 months ago you gave my people 72 hours to leave or face imprisonment. What terms did you offer us then?" Kexel's crystalline features flickered with nervous energy. That was a mistake. We were misled by the Confederation Council. We never wanted conflict with humanity." Sarah almost smiled. It was amazing how quickly opinions changed when the balance of power shifted. "Governor, I'm going to give you the same terms you gave us. You have 72 hours to evacuate all Confederation military personnel from this world. After that, Kepler 442b returns to human administration. But, Admiral, We have civilians here, families, children. So did we, Sarah replied coldly. The difference is, we're not planning genocide. Your civilians can stay if they accept human authority. Your military cannot. The transmission ended, and Sarah turned to her tactical officer. Status report on the other liberation operations. Proceeding ahead of schedule. The Zephyrian systems have surrendered without resistance. The Voidwalker territories are requesting immediate alliance with humanity. Only the hegemony worlds are still offering organized resistance. Sarah nodded. The galaxy was fracturing exactly as Admiral Torres had predicted. The Confederation had been held together by fear of human military superiority. When that fear proved justified, the alliance collapsed like a house of cards. Her communicator chimed. Admiral, incoming transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Torres appeared on her personal screen. He looked older, but there was something lighter in his expression. The weight of impending extinction had been lifted from his shoulders. Sarah, excellent work on the Kepler operation. How are things proceeding? Better than expected, sir. Half the Confederation worlds are actively seeking alliance with us. The other half are too busy with internal conflicts to pose any threat. Torres nodded. That's what happens when you unite 12 species through fear instead of trust. Remove the fear, and you're left with 12 species who remember why they didn't like each other in the first place? Sarah looked out at the planet below. Already, human transport ships were landing, bringing back the families and civilians who had been forced to flee. Children who would grow up free instead of hiding in refugee camps. Sir, what's our long-term strategy? We can't occupy the entire galaxy. We don't want to, Torres replied. That's the difference between us and the Confederation. They wanted to rule through fear. We're going to lead through example. A new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on a secondary screen from her office on Luna. She looked excited, holding a data pad filled with information. Admiral Chen, you need to see this, Elena said. I've been analyzing communication intercepts from across the galaxy. The response to our victory isn't what we expected. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Explain. Fear, yes, but also something else. Respect, even admiration. Some species are calling our defense of Sol the greatest military achievement in galactic history. Torres looked interested. Go on. Elena consulted her data pad. The Altarian Republic has formally requested human military advisors. The Vegan Collective wants to establish exchange programs with our academies. Even some former Confederation species are asking us to teach them. Sarah felt a chill. They want us to train them again? After everything that happened? It's different this time, Elena continued. Before, they saw us as useful tools, primitive warmongers who could teach them to fight better. Now they see us as, well, as the people who just defeated the entire galaxy with 400 ships. Torres was quiet for a long moment. They want to learn from the winners. Exactly. But more than that, they want to understand us. Human psychology, human culture, human ways of thinking. They've realized that our military success comes from something deeper than just tactics. Sarah thought about her years teaching at the academy. Her alien students had learned formations and strategies, but they had never truly understood the human mindset. They had memorized the lessons without grasping the philosophy behind them. What are you proposing, Elena? A new kind of alliance, not based on fear or domination, but on genuine cooperation. We teach them not just how to fight, but how to think. They share their technology and resources with us. Everyone benefits. Torres nodded slowly. The Terran Commonwealth. Exactly. Membership based on shared values, not shared enemies. Species that want to learn and grow together instead of fighting over scraps. Sarah looked out at Kepler 442b again. Already, alien civilians were emerging from their homes, cautiously approaching the human landing sites. Children pressed against windows, curious about the humans who had seemed so terrifying just hours ago. What about the species that refuse? The ones who still see us as a threat? Torres smiled grimly. Then they can explain to their own people why they're choosing isolation over prosperity. History will judge them. Elena's expression grew more serious. There's something else. The intelligence data shows that our victory has had an unexpected effect. Several species are experiencing what can only be described as cultural renaissance. Art, Science, philosophy. It's like defeating the Confederation freed them from something. Sarah began to understand. Fear stifles creativity. When you're constantly worried about survival, you can't focus on growth. Precisely. The Confederation kept the galaxy in a state of controlled tension. Everyone was too worried about their neighbors to really innovate. Now that the threat is gone, they're free to explore and create again. Torres looked thoughtful. So our victory didn't just save humanity, it liberated the entire galaxy from a system based on fear and suspicion. It appears so. The question is, what do we do with that responsibility? Sarah made her decision. We do what humans have always done. We adapt, we learn, and we help others do the same. She turned to her communications officer. Send a message to all ships in the Liberation Fleet. New standing orders. We're not just reclaiming human territory, we're building something better. 3 months later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the rebuilt academy on Kepler 442b. The same halls where she had once taught alien officers now hosted a different kind of education. Human and alien instructors worked side by side, teaching integrated classes to students from dozens of species. The memorial wall in the main entrance honored the humans who had died during the Confederation War. But next to it stood another memorial, dedicated to the alien civilians who had suffered under the old system of fear and oppression. Commander Velkith approached her, the same Zephyrian officer who had once been her student. He wore the uniform of the new Terran Commonwealth, with rank insignia that meant something different now. Admiral Chen, he said, offering a respectful salute. The morning briefing is ready. Sarah returned the salute. How are the new cadets? Adapting? Better than expected. Having humans and aliens learn together changes everything. They're not just memorizing tactics anymore. They're learning to think as a team. Sarah nodded. It was what she had hoped for. The old system had taught species to fight like humans while thinking like themselves. The new system taught them to think together, to combine the best of all their cultures and capabilities. Any word from Admiral Torres? Yes, ma'am. The Altarian. Negotiations are complete. They're formally joining the Commonwealth. That makes 18 member species so far. 18 species choosing cooperation over conflict, choosing trust over fear. It wasn't the galaxy-spanning empire the Confederation had tried to build, but it was something better. It was a community. Sarah looked out the academy windows at the bustling spaceport below. Human and alien ships landed side by side, carrying students, teachers, traders, and diplomats. The galaxy was healing from 50 years of controlled tension and suspicion. Commander, she said, what's today's lesson plan? Velkith consulted his datapad. Advanced strategic thinking. Specifically, how to turn disadvantages into advantages. I believe you humans call it thinking outside the box. Sarah smiled. It was the same lesson that had saved humanity from extinction.